Hollywood, the home of the rich and the famous, the birthplace of cinema. The glamour, the riches, and the lifestyles leave us hanging on their every moment. But not all of its secrets are the glitzy success stories they seem. In fact, Hollywood, whilst propelling some to superstardom, has chewed up and spat out more ambitious hopefuls than you or I have had hot dinners. It has been host to scandal, murder, crime, and every inch of it has a secret to spill, if somebody's listening. Some of those will go to the grave, and some are already talking from beyond it. Hollywood has always been home to the devious, whether it be money-pinching studios, payroll drug dealers, shady fixers, mobsters, or simply stars with too much money and little to no inhibitions. It's time to peek behind the curtain. Let's take a look at some of the ghosts of the past and what macabre tales they have to tell. It's one of the oldest buildings on the Strip, with arguably the most checkered history of violence and despair, a magnet for misfortune and synonymous with death. Its origins were humble enough. Built in 1921, it was a grocery store serving a growing community. So how did this plot of Hollywood history descend into what some describe as a portal of darkness? Converted to a nightclub in 1946, renowned mobster Mickey Cohen purchased the Viper Room, then known as the grocery store Young's Market, and transformed it into a jazz joint called the Cotton Club. The club served as a front for the headquarters of his mob operations, which took place in the building's basement. By 1950, the club had rebranded 3 separate times and reopened as a strip club following a fire that caused significant damage. It was 31 October 1993, barely 2 months after Mr. Johnny Depp and a business partner had bought a 51% share in the Viper Room, and already it was known as one of LA's coolest spots. It was a place where rock stars and young Hollywood could let loose without fear of paparazzi, a place where legends played and other legends in the audience would routinely jump up on stage and join them. None of the ghosts are River, Miss Fiora says, but he's not the only person who died here. People talk about the 1990s when it was Johnny's place, but that stage goes back to the 1940s. The Viper Room sits on the Sunset Strip at the western end of Sunset Boulevard, where it bumps up against Beverly Hills. This stretch of the most storied boulevard in Los Angeles has enjoyed a mythic place in pop culture thanks to decade-defining venues such as the Whiskey A Go-Go and the Roxy. Of all the hallowed venues that remain, though, the Viper is the first, the original, and the least tampered with. The Whiskey has its Doors legends, and the Roxy has the biggest room, the loudest stage. But the Viper Room is gem-like, small and perfectly formed. The acoustics are impeccable, and it's so intimate that it's filled to capacity with only 196 people. It's also essentially the same room as in the 1940s. If those walls could talk, they'd have stories from the days of the mobster Mr. Bugsy Siegel. It was Mr. Tom Waits that suggested to Mr. Depp that he buy the place. He even proposed the name, the Viper Room. And at the time, Mr. Depp craved a private sanctuary for him and his friends. "I wanted a place to escape," he once said. And so he relaunched the venue. It became known as Johnny's Place, not to be confused with Johnny's Booth, which is an actual VIP area at the club. He had it built specially, says Miss Fiora. You can't see into it because of the one-way glass, but you can see out and watch the gig. The star-studded launch featured a set by none other than Mr. Tom Petty, and a crowd that put the Grammys and the Oscars to shame. Instantly, the Viper Room was the place. Stars realized it was a safe place to party, and so they did. Stories abound of Miss Kate Moss behind the bar, or Mr. Quentin Tarantino crawling around on the floor looking for his wallet yelling, "It says bad motherfucker on it." And on top of it all, there was burlesque, in keeping with the venue's illicit traditions. Mr. Depp specifically wanted it that way. The Pussycat Dolls had a residency there for 6 years, long before they took on the later Don't Cha lineup, just 2.5 months after opening. On October 31st, 1993, actor River Phoenix went into convulsions on the sidewalk in front of the club, suffering an overdose due to lethal levels of cocaine and morphine. Morbidly Hollywood tours still frequent the spot, with herds of snap-happy tourists clambering to stand on the spot. The passing of Hollywood star River Phoenix cemented the Viper Room's sordid reputation. At just 23 years old, River was poised to have a successful acting career when he collapsed outside of the Viper Room. It's not the first time Johnny Depp has been near the hot seat of the federal court of law. In 1999, Johnny Depp found himself in the middle of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit filed by his business partner, Anthony Fox. Just days before he was to testify, Anthony mysteriously disappeared, along with his truck and .38 caliber rifle. His truck was found 19 days later, but his body was never recovered. The disappearance remains a mystery. Fox had accused Depp of defrauding him of millions of dollars in profits and was due to testify against his business partners. In 2004, Depp turned over his share in the nightclub to Constance, who resold it. Rumors and conspiracies swirl around the disappearance. Anthony had a history of doing a disappearing act. His mother supposedly helped him commit fraud previously. However, some believe he was murdered and his body still remains buried in the building. EVPs have been caught, and one person who worked for 16 years refuses to go into the room he calls the pit. The room allegedly encasing a body. Given the death of River, mysterious disappearances, and the mobster connections, it would make sense for some interesting ghosts to be hanging around. The most interesting professional visit happened in 2017 by the Ghost Adventures crew. During Rita's decade-long tenure at the Viper Room, she's experienced some pretty unexplainable things. They went into a quieter area and were able to capture voices on tape that Viper Room employee Rita Fiora believed to be River when he said, "I get confused. I've had my hair yanked, a hand on my leg. Oh yeah, they're grabby, the guy ghosts." But there's a chick ghost too. She was texting me once from a dead number. I'd talk out loud to her, and she'd text me a response. She was mad that I couldn't see her. Sad. One bartender who had worked at the Viper Room for 16 years said that he felt like the bottom bar had a different energy than the top, a more malevolent one. He said he felt a constant pressure in his chest whenever he was down at the bottom bar, and that he had even seen glasses fly off of tables on their own. According to Rita, the spirit of River Phoenix isn't the only entity inside the club. Some claim that the bar is the site of a portal, an opening to the spirit world that can't be seen. Was the Viper Room covering up a murder? River had returned to LA from Utah while shooting what would be his final film, Dark Blood. After a day of shooting in LA, River was coming down with a cold and wanted to sleep it off in his hotel room, as he had important meetings the next morning. Siblings Joaquin and Rain were in town to visit and wanted to go to the Viper Room, but were underage and would need a celebrity escort to get in. Samantha, his girlfriend, volunteered, and River planned to stay behind, but got a call from his friend Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, inviting him to play on stage. A last-minute decision, River grabbed his guitar and ran to meet his girlfriend and sibling. Upon arrival, River was told by Flea that there was no room on the stage for him, and he could not play. He then sat in a booth at the back of the club with his group. John Frusciante, who had recently quit the Chili Peppers and was suffering heroin addiction, was close friends with River. Knowing that River was bummed out about not being able to play on stage, he handed River a Dixie cup filled with unspecified liquid and said, "Drink this, Riv, it'll make you feel fabulous." Unquestioningly, River knocked back the cocktail, which was later discovered to be a mixture of 8 times the lethal amount of cocaine and 3 times the lethal amount of heroin, as found in his autopsy report. There was no drug residue or inflammation found in his nasal passages, no needle marks on his body, and no alcohol found in his blood. After downing the drink, River soon vomited on himself and the table and passed out. When he came to, he began trembling violently. "What is this shit?" he asked, and quickly took a Valium to calm himself down. He could not feel his tongue or his mouth. Samantha later told filmmaker and friend William Richard that River was desperate to get out of the club and that she helped carry him outside, where he promptly collapsed and started to have seizures. John Frusciante told a panicked Samantha to leave him alone and that she was spoiling his high. There was a delay in calling 911. The young people present were not sure whether to call their agents or paramedics due to River's celebrity status. Rain threw herself on top of her brother to stop his face and hands from smashing into the pavement as his body seized. They watched him thrash helplessly on the ground for nearly 10 minutes before a paparazzi convinced Joaquin to call 911. By the time they arrived, River was unresponsive. Flea rode in the ambulance with him. From the time he'd walked into the club to the time he died, it had been only 40 minutes. Biographies about River continued only to refer to the drug pusher as a guitarist friend. But River's father gave an interview in 1994 to Australia's TV Week magazine, which corroborates the story that it was John Frusciante who gave River the deadly drink. He is only 23, the same age as River when he died, but he has a lot on his shoulders. He's keeping out of my way because he knows I'm looking for him. If you see him, tell him I'm going to strangle him. No, don't print that. But tell him he's an asshole. He's very rich, but he is a heavy drug user, and now he is a pusher. With River, he was like, do drugs, do drugs. If you run into him, tell him he may have gone back into the woodwork now, but he'll answer. I want him to know that I think he's scum. Print it and let him see it. He insinuated himself into my son's life, and River was too sweet to eject him. River was moving away from drugs and was actually trying to get this guy off heroin himself. River booked him into a farm, talked to him for hours, invested time into him. But the guy broke out and dragged my son down with him. Now he is alive, and River is dead. Where is the fairness in that? An enigma remains because his death was never properly investigated. People close to the incident refused to speak, which produced a vague police report. The media took the usual liberties of using sensationalism to sell their stories, and certain rumors have never rested. Apparently, Johnny Depp had no telephone in his office. Or isn't it more likely that everyone at the club wanted to immediately distance themselves? Had someone told the ambulance driver about the lethal overdose handed to River in a cup, he could have possibly received a life-saving shot of Narcan. It wouldn't have helped for an overdose of cocaine, however. In any case, he was ushered out of the club and left to deal with it. His sister sat on his chest and legs to stop his seizures. How long was he inside the Viper Room overdosing before he was taken outside? Was he kicked out, or did they take him outside willingly? Reports vary on this. Why did Joaquin, Rain, and Samantha mention the Valium but say nothing about the poisoned drink? Why, with so many supposed friends and over an extended period, did they do nothing?